The 2025 Las Vegas Grand Prix.
From all over the world.
We're back to the United States for the third and final time this season. Specifically at the upside-down pig-shaped street circuit of Las Vegas for the first race of the triple header, with its beautiful main straight, its back straight, and this other straight. To be fair, it's certainly not as bad as a parking lot, but I can't say that it's much better either. This is because while it's one of the fastest races in the F1 calendar, and despite the race last year being eventful with Colapinto dismantling his car in qualifying, Perez pulling one of the most absurd overtakes I've ever seen, and Verstappen winning the championship after a generational run of form, and even the year before that with Leclerc chasing Perez to take second in the final lap, after Max abused him in turn 1 and Norris had a massive shunt, it's the shenanigans around the race itself that are, interesting. And naturally this year was no different, with the Sphere wilding, a whole concert being held, and Mickey Mouse? And the tickets cost how much? But nevertheless, just like the other two American races, a lot of teams decided to bring a special livery, such as Williams, who took inspiration from Merc and painted the car black. VCarb also didn't disappoint as per usual with this weird gradient they put on, and Sauber with the checkered flag livery to indicate the Audi takeover. But speaking of that, Audi also wanted a piece of that pie, so they joined in with their concept of the 2026 car, which looks weird right now because it has no sponsors, but it's still cool nonetheless. They also tried to sneak in the fact that they're targeting to win the championship by 2030 and thought we wouldn't notice, but yeah, that's not happening, buddy. You tried to win with Ferrari of all teams for 4 whole years and all you managed to achieve is... But whilst we're on the topic of new teams, Cadillac have now officially completed their first test with Perez at the helm, although the car is actually a Ferrari from a few years ago, but we don't talk about that. But speaking of Ferrari, there's also some drama that I do have to talk about, which is to do with John Elkann, the team CEO, that said in a public interview that the drivers should talk less and focus on driving, which is an insane conclusion to come to even as a Drive to Survive fan, especially after watching the past 4 seasons. Like, dude saw his cars consistently blow the fuck up completely unprovoked firsthand, get disqualified a gazillion times because of the stupid blankware, handled like a castrated horse if it had no legs, and on top of all of that, the race engineers have been lobotomized dropping shit like this on the radio.
Must be the water.
And yet he still thought, wow, we haven't won in 18 years. Must have been the drivers, dude. But anyways, I'm done talking about this clown and let's just get into this weekend. After some rainfall and the track being flooded on Thursday, it was time for the first practice session, which was about to be crucial since most teams brought some track-specific upgrades that they needed to test. But just as they started rolling out the garage and setting their first lap times, it was immediately apparent that there's no grip to be found, as Hadjar and Sainz were faster than Leclerc and Lando, and Hamilton was drifting out of turn 1. Berman then went off track twice in the Sphere section, with Norris doing the same and Gasly locking up and bailing out. But as the track conditions improved, we got a nostalgic Red Bull 1-2, but just don't mind that gap. Lewis Hamilton, Gabi and his manager then locked up and went straight on, with Norris measuring his car's turning circle, then hitting the wall out of turn 9 but coming out unscathed, although it did cost him a lot of practice time. Oscar Piastri then nearly spun in turn 7 and Alex Albon locked up. But whilst all of that went on, Pierre Gasly was lurking in P3 inexplicably, but after Albon and Liam went wide one more time, Leclerc set the fastest lap to bring an end to the session. Free practice 2 was far more representative, as there was actually some semblance of grip, although it was still slippery. But as the teams exited the garage, Verstappen was first to pop in a competitive time on the medium, as Hamilton got massively impeded by Hülkenberg, whose teammate missed turn 5, with the McLaren coming alive with the drivers going 1-2, although Norris was still doing 3-point turns along with Ollie Behrman, Isaac Hadjar and Charles Leclerc, who almost hit the wall. But after bolting on some fresh softs, Lando went quickest once again, just for the session to be brought to a halt because of a drain cover that came off, which is the exact same situation we had for the past 2 years. However, I can't blame the FIA, because $240 million is just too low a budget to expect something like this not to happen. But nevertheless, once we finally got back out again, Leclerc's gearbox went kaput, only for another red flag to be called because of another drainage cover, ending the session on the spot. Prior to FP3, there was some rain, which meant the teams had to do with intermediates for a little while, with Hamilton going off at the first corner, Albon bailing out of turn 5, and Liam's car exploding for no rhyme or reason. But once the slicks were on, Lewis nearly drove into the back of Liam as Norris missed turn 7. But with the lap times getting exponentially faster, Verstappen set the quickest time to bring an end to the session. With practice done, it was time to qualify, and remember how I said the track flooded on Thursday? Well, Las Vegas really said,
You wanna see me do it again?
And so the session got underway on wet tires that usually never see the light of day. Or night, I guess. But as the teams left the garage, people immediately started going off, with the visibility being piss poor. However, with the first laps being complete, the Astons were actually 1-2 as they were the first to exit the pits, whilst Leclerc's engine quit halfway through. But as we were approaching the end of Q1, the yellow flags were having a seizure because of the amount of incidents, with Perelman locking up and hitting the barrier and Albon smashing the wall, but thankfully managing to make it to the pits. But the important bit is that Hamilton failed to put a lap together and was dead last. Q2 was next, and sadly it was less chaotic as it was delayed until it started drying. But after the first laps were complete, Stroll was the man to beat, if you can believe that, with people still sliding off. On the final laps, George Russell was fastest, meanwhile Oscar was nowhere as Gasly was on fire and made it to Q3 in an Alpine, and Bremen's wheel cover imploded because of the crash earlier. But now it's time to set the grid, with the first Q3 runs on intermediates going Sainz's way, with Hadjar cooking and Leclerc locking up. On the final run, Sainz set yet another cracking lap that got beat by Max Verstappen, but it was Norris who proceeded to drive off into a different planet, taking pole by 3 whole tenths. After a crazy-ass qualifying and everyone lining up on the grid, it was time for the race, as the 5 lights were out and Verstappen had a great start, which meant Norris had to cut across aggressively, so he went off, allowing Russell to get past too. Meanwhile, further back, Antonelli and Albon jumped to the start as Hamilton managed to gain 8 positions thanks to Lawson pulling his signature move on Piastri and Gabi murdering Stroll, which brought out a virtual safety car way too late, with Marshall shockingly running on track whilst the race was still ongoing. I guess all the outrage and quote investigation because of the Mexico incident changed absolutely nothing. But nevertheless, after the restart, everyone maintained position more or less, with Leclerc pushing like crazy, which allowed him to get past Oscar, whose championship is unraveling, to which he responded by posting a quote about how McLaren are favoring Lando and instantly deleted it ahead of the race. Albon then drove into the back of Hamilton, throwing debris all over the track, which again took way too long to be dealt with a virtual safety car. After the restart, everyone maintained position more or less, as George Russell started suffering from a steering issue which made him drop back into the DRS of Lando. He then came first into the box, which magically solved his issue, as he was followed by Oscar a few laps later, and Lando and Max a bit after that. The fresh tires allowed Norris to clear George and go after Verstappen, which he failed to do. Meanwhile, Leclerc, Kimi and Piastri were fighting for 4th, with Piastri coming out on top, although Antonelli still clinched 5th after an insane 46-lap stint on hards. But whilst that went on, Lando Norris was suddenly facing an issue which lost him a ton of time, so he barely scraped through in 2nd place, as George Russell was catching him like crazy, with Max then crossing the line to win the race, with Sainz unfortunately losing out on the podium and Hamilton recovering all the way up to 10th in pure spite. But I have to say that the race was a bit underwhelming considering what happened in qualifying. In the Drivers' Championship, Lando looks ever more likely to bring it home as Oscar is unable to recover his form. As for the Constructors, Red Bull caught Mercedes in the fight for 2nd, with Ferrari losing out again thanks to another miserable weekend. But anyways, please subscribe because I had to wake up at unholy hours to make this video, and I'm going to sleep.